Welcome to the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. Today we have Hannah Otto with us from Scott Bikes, competitive cyclist, Pearl Izumi, all the different brands that you ride for. First Endurance, I think. Is that the nutrition company?
Yep.
Oh, good. Yeah, I didn't want to say the wrong one. Hannah, you are a national champion. You just won cross-country marathon national championships in the elite category. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm super excited. Yeah, that was a big goal of mine going into the season. And so it feels good to set a goal and follow all the way through to the execution.
Yeah, it feels super good, right? Boxes are checked, especially for type A folks like us, and I'm sure most people listening to this. I just want to take time for this podcast episode. This is going to be really different. If you're watching this or listening to it right now, we're going to just dive into Hannah's race, go over into the learnings that she has, the things that she feels she did well. And then we're also going to talk about my race over the past weekend that I just did, Tahoe Trail 100. A crazy race with a bunch of crazy circumstances that somehow led to me qualifying for Leadville. I thought it was a really, really slim chance, and I think it was, and somehow it all worked out. So I'm going to Leadville, and we're going to talk through the race and see how it all went. But Hannah, I want to dive into your race first. National championship. It's pretty great. Can we just go into like what the course was in terms of length, and then any specifics you did to prepare for it in terms of training? Like, were you targeting your training toward this, and how'd that go?
Yeah, the course was 53 miles with 75,000 feet, 7,500.
7,500.
Let me re-say that. The course was 53 miles with 7,500 feet of climbing. And it was almost all single track, like maybe 80 to 90% single track. And not technical in the regards of being anything scary, but very technical in regards to carrying speed, carrying momentum, lots of roots, lots of rocks, lots of corners, lots of like little dips and G-outs and stuff where if you come into it too fast, you're going to have an issue. If you go in too slow, so it's just really a bike handler's course. I called it a true mountain biker's course. 'Cause it's one of those things where you can just bleed speed. If you lose focus for even a moment.
Yeah.
And so, I think for my training, there was I would say a few very specific things I did in regards to this. One, I didn't know the course ahead of time, but it took place in Roanoke, Virginia. And so I assumed an East Coast style of riding. So I assumed single track, I assumed rocky, rooty, twisty, turny. And so that's what a lot of my training was focused on leading into this. I did a lot of mountain biking, single track, which is my favorite kind of riding anyway. So twist my arm to have to focus on that for a bit. But specifically, even spending time doing sort of my own timed segments in training, because I think, we spend so much time on power numbers, which is undoubtedly a very important thing for fitness. But when you're talking about carrying speed and momentum, sometimes your power is actually lower in order to go faster. And so it was important for me in my training to focus on specific trails and how I could go the fastest on those trails, regardless of what power showed. And then the other thing was knowing, again, that it would be on the East Coast. I anticipated a very hot and humid environment. And while...
Was it? Because everybody looked like they had gone through a rainstorm at all times that I saw out there.
My video after where I'm saying like, hi, I'm Hannah, I just won nationals. I look absolutely drenched, and I definitely was. And will say that it's from dumping water on my head, but I would have been that sweaty regardless. It was in the 80s, and it was 80 to 90% humidity. So
oh my
hot
gosh.
and sticky. And then it's mountain biking. So if I was riding on the road, it would be hot, but you at least get the airflow. In this, like you ducked into the trees, and then there were sections of the course that were 15% grade, and you're just going, 5 miles per hour covered in the trees, and it's one of those things where like your knees and your shins and your forearms are dripping. Where you're like, I didn't know I really sweated here in these places. But for training, while I I couldn't replicate that where I'm from. Utah's known for being very dry, so almost the opposite.
Yeah.
What I could do was practice a hydration plan. And so I spent a lot of time with a dietitian working on the best ways that I could hydrate and to know exactly what I needed per hour. And then, of course, we had to kind of anticipate, but what does that look like in these different conditions? But at least I could have a
Yeah.
relative idea of my own sweat rate and my own needs.
How did you do that? Did you do like Gatorade sweat patches, like the most accessible one? Did you do some other sort of testing, or did you do the scales and you just holding the fluid afterward?
We did kind of a multifaceted approach, since everything kind of, aside from being in a lab, it seems that everything has sort of a margin for error. And so
Yes.
we did the scale where I'd weigh myself before and after and account for all the fluids and different foods and all that I took in. And then I also have the H drop monitor. And so I could kind of use both of those things to get an idea of a range that I fall into.
Yeah, that makes sense. And can you share your sweat rate, like how much volume you were losing, then how much sodium?
Yeah, so basically what we came to is that I need about 30 ounces an hour in order to
Okay.
not lose 2%. So we're trying to limit my losses to less than 2% throughout the course of a race. So that's going to change depending on how long the race is. And yeah, basically how long the race is, because you're going to be into a bigger deficit hour over hour. And so for this race, we anticipated a 5-hour race, which it ended up being almost exactly. And so we determined that in order to limit to less than 2%, I would need to take in 30 ounces an hour. And then
Which is about 900 milliliters,
yeah,
roughly.
so basically just shy of a liter an hour. And then for sodium, we were aiming between 500 and 800 milligrams per liter. So not a super salty sweater, but you still need some salt. And then that's a lot, though. Like, it's not...
That's a lot of fluid.
Yeah,
it's hard to take that in and carry it. And
I think for my relative body size, I would consider myself a heavy sweater. But compared to what you see other like some people, they could lose 2 liters an hour. So it is all relative. But when you step back and you count, so how am I going to carry all of this? It's very difficult.
Yeah,
very
it's a logistical
difficult.
problem.
Yes, and this is what I'm discovering the further and further that we dig into this problem, is it's also different for every race because of where aid stations are and because of weight matters in cycling. And by that, I mean carrying like a liter of water is a couple pounds. And so when you're trying to shave grams off your bike, to be like, oh, no problem, I'll just carry a couple extra pounds of water, feels like you're just destroying my watts per kilo. Like, I've worked so hard for this. It can feel really frustrating. And so not only are you weighing, pun intended, not only are you weighing not how much you need, you're also weighing, okay, but could I get away with less? And if I did extend beyond losing more than 2% of my body weight, therefore having potentially a small performance decline at the end of the race, would that be less bad than carrying it and having that weight penalty? And this is something that all of us athletes have to go through for every race, and something to consider in a race. This was twisty-turny. Leadville's very much not. Leadville is a different weight-saving game. It's also a longer race. So these are all, you can kind of see where I'm going.
Yeah,
maybe
it's
I'm rambling
complicated.
too much, but I find these puzzles to be very intriguing at the highest level.
And it's really, I wonder if we are going to see event organizers adapt their feed practices. Because right now, it's common in a mountain bike race or a gravel race. Like our mountain bike race, is common to have like some sort of feed every 20-ish miles is usually like where like you'll have it. If it's XCO, it'll be more often. And gravel racing, in some cases, it's all over the map. Sometimes you don't even have feed zones. But we've learned so much more about performance and nutrition And yet the strategy hasn't really changed from race organizers.
Mhm.
I would really like to see that change because, I mean, if you're thinking of something like Leadville, for example, I'm probably going to be losing somewhere around 1.3 liters per hour
Mhm.
at Leadville. Maybe not as much in the beginning because it's cooler, right? But then really probably once I get to like Pipeline at that point, then it's probably going to be the sun will be on us and and you're up so high it feels quite warm already. So 1.3 liters. At that point, I guess I'll probably be like 90 minutes into the race, roughly around there. That's 1.3 liters that I somehow need to figure out
For the
how to
next
bring. And as a result,
6
I have
hours?
like, yeah, for 6, well, yeah, or some of us 7 maybe, Hannah.
Well, I'm saying
But
if
yeah.
if you start
Yeah.
at Pipeline, I'm assuming you've already been riding for an hour and a half, so
Again,
6 more
some
hours.
of us 7, we'll see, Hannah, but maybe
I believe in you.
your numbers are different than mine. But it gets logistically complicated, and then even just carrying it. Like most hydration packs are only going to allow 1.5 liter bladders. Sometimes you can squeeze a 2 liter in there. So that's 2 liters. That's not even 2 hours,
And
right?
it's heavy.
In terms of like the fluid. And then also, I looked down a further rabbit hole with this, Hannah. I am always interested by how much I lose via respiration too.
Mhm.
So I started looking up like a bunch of different, like trying to look through papers and that sort of stuff. And I couldn't find a solid paper that actually shows this. However, I could find a common thing suggested in multiple places on the internet. So again, huge asterisk, keep this there. But roughly somewhere between 20 to 25% of whatever you lose in sweat loss is also then lost through respiration, just through we breathe out moisture when we breathe. And we mouth breathe constantly when we're on the bike. Hopefully you are if you're riding hard. So, so because of that, then it had me thinking like, oh, well, maybe actually instead of 1.3 liters, it needs to be closer to like 1.6 or something. And it's just really complicated.
Mhm.
And I think that we're learning a lot about nutrition. And I really hope that event organizers can match what we're learning there and also not have like orange slices and potato chips, like still have those things, but then also understand the fact that like, no, athletes need like a clean glucose and fructose product with some sodium in there. And like, tons of brands make them, so it should be easy, but like let's not just give them like, soda and chips and stuff at aid stations. It's all got to change.
So hot take, do you think
Mhm.
that the event should change it and have more aid stations, or do you think that is part of the challenge? I mean, we're watching the tour right
Yeah.
now where it's purely optimized for performance. They can get a bottle at any moment they want. That's not the kind of racing we're doing. Ours is a little bit different, but we still want to see people perform at the limits of human ability. So do we open
Yeah.
up that door and allow for that? Or do we keep it as, here is your puzzle, figure it out?
I think it will always be a puzzle, but I think that everybody wants to see athletes perform at the highest level. And everyone wants to see themselves perform at the highest level. So I think we'll just continue to solve the puzzle
Mhm.
because it's too complex to solve otherwise for all these events. They don't have the money like to then also like build this out because it could get so complicated. Like we should not have like team cars and follow cars, that sort of thing, Imagine if that was for like amateurs. Yeah, I don't want to imagine that. So
But you
that won't
could, like
happen.
in the Grand Prix, have motos with water.
You could. I'd
I'm
be
not,
very
just to be
interested
clear,
to
I'm
see.
not advocating for this. This is a hot
Yeah.
take conversation.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, so in the end, I want it to absolutely be Formula One. Every form of bike racing, I want it to improve and get to the points of like pinnacles of performance. And that's what I want. I want myself to perform at my best. And I totally acknowledge the fact that I don't merit what a top athlete might merit or even need what a top athlete might need. So I get that. But yeah, I don't think it'll ever evolve to be like what the tour is. It's just too complicated with the constraints.
I
So
mean,
I think we'll always do the
logistically,
puzzle.
you can't. Like going back to nationals with 80% single
Yeah.
track, it's impossible. We had
Yeah.
3 aid stations, and that was honestly pretty good considering what the course was
That's
like.
great.
So, like
It's
we're
just
saying,
part of
it's
it.
part of the puzzle, and everyone has the same amount, and so we all have to make that decision. Do you take more time and grab more? Do you grab less?
Yeah, and I guess racing for amateurs and you're doing like big events like Leadville or anything else, like you just have to, I mean, you don't have to. Theoretically, you could just like carry nutrition, refill it at aid stations, but you don't know what you're going to get, that sort of a thing. But yeah, I mean, it is a team effort where you need to bring people to support you. And, it is, people are probably advantaged if they have more people to help them for sure.
It's
So,
like a science
which speaking,
experiment. Like before the morning
yes.
before the race, when I have everything laid out, I have like measuring cups and stuff and like a food
Yeah.
scale. And Clayton is like, when did we start doing science experiments? In the wee hours of the morning before these races.
And then you're doing that math problem of like, you have this many things to get across the river in the canoe, but you can only carry this much, you're doing the same word problem. Yeah, it's crazy. Also, I'm just going to throw a subtle plug. If anybody's listening to this and they want to help me with feeds at Leadville, I might need that. So my dad and son are coming. My son is 9 years old. I'm not going to have him go to a feed zone on his own. He's going to be there with my dad. So we can't divide and conquer there. So if anybody's interested, let me know. And we might end up taking you up. So Hannah, back to the race. Your practice technicality in terms of maintaining momentum through technical stuff and finding that smoothness that allows you to kind of see the matrix and to flow through something well. And then you have this nutrition plan, it's dialed in. Was it rainy? Was it muddy? That's common with the East Coast. And then like break me through the execution. Like what problems did you encounter and how did you overcome them in the race?
Yeah, it was interesting because it did rain almost every evening there. And so while it didn't rain in the race, you could tell what areas of the course held water and what didn't. So the first, 8 to 10 miles were actually quite wet and slippery and sort of out of place where you'd hit the rocks and slip, and it was shocking. And then the rest of the course was completely dry, which meant the start was kind of exciting because we were a little bit all over the place, and you're not necessarily going to pick your equipment for 8 out of 53 miles. So I think we all had a little bit maybe underbiked sort of for those conditions or undertired or whatever you want to say. But then the rest was dry. And so my focus was, knowing that this course has the longest climb, I think, was 10 minutes, and everything else was a lot of twists and turns. Drafting was not going to be a major factor here. And so my goal was to find a moment to get away and then execute on my ability to sort of time trial and to really hone the focus that I think is one of my strengths, is the ability to focus on my own. I think it's something I've worked on a lot through some of the FKTs that I've done where you truly are alone. And so I was able to do that pretty early. I got away during that wet section, so less than 10 miles in, and I pretty quickly built up a gap for about a minute. And I had that gap coming around mile 25 of 1 minute. And I just for a moment lost focus, looking down the trail at something else, thinking about the next aid. We're not even talking about losing focus that a lot of people talk about, like, I wonder what I'm going to have for dinner tonight. We're talking about thinking 3 minutes ahead rather than right then and there. And I clipped a bar on a tree and I went over the bars. And even when I was scrambling to get up, I'm thinking, like, how much time is this? Is this 10 seconds? Is this 20 seconds? Like you're trying to. And it's funny because in the moment you're like, okay, I probably got up. I got up really fast. Maybe that's 15 seconds. But you also lose all of that momentum, all of that speed. And then you're reeling. And I think this is what really got me was now I'm riding along. I'm thinking about what happened. I'm thinking about the speed that I lost. I'm thinking about the fact that I've blood dripping down my leg. I'm taking inventory of my equipment. And it felt like out of nowhere, second place was just back on my wheel. It felt almost instantaneous. And I think for me, this was the real winning moment, because I think there's a version of the story where this happens and you're 20 miles in, you just lost a minute gap and you panic. You think, oh my gosh, I just threw it away. She caught up. I've lost the national championship. What did I do? And you start beating yourself up. And I did have a very brief moment of that where you're like, oh my gosh. And then I paused and I was like, okay, this was a wake-up call. Like, you got a gap once and you'll do it again. And within probably 2 minutes of her catching me, I refocused, got back on the attack, and in the last 25 miles of the race, instead of focusing on what that gap was back to her, I focused on what I was doing in the moment. And through that, I was able to build a 5-minute gap to the finish.
Wow, way to go. Way to go. That's really tricky to do. It's, like call it being present or being focused or whatever you want, like it's very hard for a person that lays out a plan and has everything executed. It's very hard to not instantly go into a retrospective mode where you start to analyze what happened to the plan and why aren't things going to plan. However, I think that all of us that follow, because I'm in the same boat with this, all of us that follow this approach of having a very clear goal with clear steps and all of those procedures and things in place in order to fulfill that, we need to recognize the fact that there's a time when you turn that off.
Mm-hmm.
And you turn that off because it's already done. You don't need to focus on it anymore. And from here on out, you just focus on the execution. And what the execution looks like is the there and the now, like right in the moment. That's really cool to see, like, you refocus, re-lock in, and then you're able to feel that you see the matrix again.
Mm-hmm.
You're able to just carry the momentum and roll smooth.
Yeah, and
to
remember that it's not over until it's over. I think a lot of the time when we're out there and we're racing, we try to anticipate, well, if this happens, then this will happen. Or, if someone caught me, then that means they'll beat me. Or the same, maybe, well, I'm ahead now, therefore I'm going to win. Like, none of these things are true. What matters is what happens when you cross the finish line, and everything before is just a part of the story. And so I think we get really caught up wanting this story to be perfect and beautiful, and how are we going to present it after, and how much did I win by, and what did that win look like? And honestly, it doesn't matter. What matters is, well, a lot of things matter, but in the scheme of racing and that story of who wins the national title, it's who crosses the finish line first. And It doesn't have to be perfect to get there.
Yeah, well said. Would you have made any changes with the plan that you had, whether that's equipment, nutrition, or pacing or strategy?
It's a good question. I think at this juncture, since I was able to pull off the win, I don't think so. I think it all went really well. Obviously, I would not lose focus in the middle, right? But that's easier said than done. But I think, going into it next year, I'll probably have a very similar approach, plus whatever new things we're always learning and adapting to year over year. So yeah, I'm really happy with it.
And it's in the same location next year. Is that correct?
As far as I know, they usually do 2 years in a row. So at this point, I'm just assuming.
Yeah, I think it is going to be there. So that's exciting. Well, Hannah, this is incredible. You get to wear the jersey. Are you going to have the Stars and Stripes jersey by Leadville, do you think?
That's the goal. Working really hard with Pearl Izumi too. We had this thing designed right away afterwards.
Awesome.
And sent off. So hopefully the factories are able to get it in time, but that's the plan. And it's definitely, I think, the national championship, I've thought a lot about it, and I think it is a really special one. As a sport, each and every sport has their own events that are very specific and special to that sport. But I think a national title sort of transcends individual sports, and that's what makes these competitions so special. Because even in sports I don't know, like rhythmic gymnastics, if someone tells me they're a national champion, that means something to me, because I can make assumptions about their dedication and their journey based on that. And so I think it's definitely something I don't take lightly, and I'm very grateful to be able to have that jersey and plan on taking it over to Europe a couple times. And I'm just very grateful.
That's awesome. Super exciting. Also, congratulations to all the people that were there at national championships and gave it their all. I know that we have quite a few people that used TrainerRoad to win national championships over the last week there in Roanoke. If you did, let us know. It'd be awesome to hear about it. I know of some already, but I'm sure that there are others that I don't know about. So let us know, and it'd be fun to congratulate you guys. So it's just really exciting stuff. It'd be cool to go there next year. Maybe I go to nationals next year. That'd be fun.
That'd
So
be great.
we'll
But
have to
you
see.
also raced very
I did.
recently at Tahoe Trail.
Yeah, they changed the course. We talked about it, I think, in a previous week where, and it turns out, and I don't know if this is fully accurate, but from what I heard, I do know that like a lot of the people, so the way that Tahoe Trail works, I don't know about the other ones, is that Lifetime doesn't actually organize the course at all. Like they don't do that. That's the people at the venue. And in this case, it's North Star. It's a huge ski resort and mountain bike park, and just like Four Seasons Resort. It's a great place. So they had those folks lay out the course. It's traditionally been known as a fire road course. This new course, when I saw it, I was like, oh, that looks awesome. And then I never trust, like with the ride with GPS, I never trust the elevation data you get from it. It always seems a little low. Strava seems to be more accurate with their when you create a route. So I recreated the route. Noticed it had some new sections and looked at it and I was like, oh my gosh, 11,200 feet of climbing in 61 miles. This is an absolute bear of a race. And I don't know if this is true again, but turns out that the folks that laid out the course, they're like downhill and e-bike bros. And they just laid out a sick course on the e-bikes and they're like, it's great. and then like somebody asked them, they're like, why'd you do 11,200 feet of climbing for this course? That's like so much. And they're like, is that a lot? Like they didn't even know, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. My e-bike seemed to handle it just fine. So, but the course was rad. They did drop us down to 2 laps instead of 3 laps. I do think that was the right call. But boy, it changed the strategy entirely. So like, that went from a race where it was like, wow, this is so long and hard that I am absolutely just going to stick to my guns and my pacing targets and be ultra conservative all day. And my plan was to basically finish the day somewhere around like 240-ish watts. And then like that would be my NP for the day. But even on the first climb, I was going to be riding at like 240, 250. I was not going to be riding at 300. But because I knew that it would just be Pac-Man mode on the second and third laps and you just be, sweeping people up. But in this case, when they changed it to 2 laps, it really changed. It meant that it was going to be a 4-hour race. And then this course, after the first little bit, you ended up dropping down into this spot that was freshly logged. It was about a foot and a half, like a foot deep of like silty, moon dusty, wood chippy, loggy, rocky mess. And then after that, it's super tight single track for a long time. So everyone was like, I've got to fight to get to that point. It was about a 13-minute climb that you start off with. And
that's just long enough and just short enough to be very painful.
Yeah, very hard start. It always is a hard start, but this one was very hard. And it ramps up just steeper and steeper and steeper and steeper as you get up to the top. So there's a floor to it. And I'm going to send up some screenshots here. I can't share my screen because there's a lot of experimental things on my TrainerRoad account right now that I don't want to share. So I'm just going to send in some screenshots. Lots of things will be blurred out, but the important stuff will be there so we can see like the ride file. But for me on that first climb, what I ended up doing is I did 299 average for that first 13-minute climb. And this was me trying to be like, I'm going to ride hard because my FTP at this time is about 288. I'm going to ride hard, but I'm not going to go into that like VO2 debt where I'm just completely cracked. I'm going to ride like top of threshold. And I know that means that people are going to pass me. But I do know that means that if it can last for 13 minutes, that means that people that were going too hard will already start to blow up around that time frame. Ideally, it was 20 minutes long, a little longer than 20, because then you'd really sort folks out. But it wasn't. It was going to be 13.
So did you use your power for that to pace, or did you listen to your body more?
Yeah. I wasn't looking at the head unit the whole time. I have like a really good fix on what power feels like, but I was checking down and looking down at it constantly, or I shouldn't say constantly, consistently. Every minute or two, I would glance down and be like, yep, okay, I'm where I'm at. What I feel is what it is, and I would just double check that.
And that feels easier to do at the top of that climb because you're already starting to hurt, you're falling into the rhythm, you're breathing hard, adrenaline's wearing off a little bit. What about the first 3 minutes where everybody around you is sprinting, which makes you lose perspective of how fast you're going, and also adrenaline is going through your veins? I don't know if you've ever done that thing where you start an interval and your computer says like 400 watts and you're like, doesn't feel like 400. Maybe I'm just really fast today. And then you just slowly die.
And then you realize, no, you're not really fast today. Hannah, I'm looking at this right now, the beginning part of that start, and I'm looking at a section where for 3 minutes I was doing 330 watts.
Okay.
I was going backwards like a rock in that field. Like a rock.
I bet
people were
not
blowing by
because
me
it's slow, but because everyone's going to
Yep.
start so hard. Yeah.
People were on single speeds, dudes on flat pedals, like everyone's blowing by me, you know what I mean? But I was just like, it's okay. We're going to get to this village and then I'm just going to hold 290 watts.
Nice.
And when it's flat through the village, and then I'm probably going to pass like 20 or 30 people just because of that. And sure enough, that's what happened, right? It's easy to push hard when it's steep, and then it's not easy to push hard when you aren't being forced to do it. And you can really make up a lot of time. But once we dropped into that descent, it was so dusty, and there was a guy that like sprinted around me in the beginning. And here's a pro tip, whenever somebody sprints around you and to get in front of you in a technical section, it's one of two things. One, they're very technically good and they need to be up there. Number two, they're very insecure about their technical abilities. and definitely had a situation where there were a few people that sprinted around at the very top before it. And my judgment was these people are not confident in their abilities. So we went into that, and all I couldn't see my wheel. I could kind of see my hands, and then I would see like helmets and shoulders. And that's all I could see. It was super rough. We were probably going 20 to 30 miles an hour. And I was just like, be light on the bike. So then if you come across a giant rock or a bike or a body, you can be light and go over it, you know?
Over a
and it
body.
was just
Ideally not.
yeah, ideally not. But it was pure chaos. It was crazy, really hard to see. Couldn't see anything on that first descent. Really tricky. But I just knew, I was like, look, like I didn't blow myself up, and I'm in a spot where I can continue to climb and continue to do well. And then I was like, just commit to always leaning into the gas pedal for the rest of the day instead of easing out of it. And if you do that, you'll start to sweep people up. And sure enough, like that's absolutely what happened. On the course had that steep climb, technical, sketchy descent, then single track and very windy in the trees and like rocky and rooty and really speed controlled. But you were constantly kind of floating in this like tempo to VO2 sort of a thing. And then after that, long stable climb for like 75 minutes with the final portion of it being really like technical. It's a descending trail that's rocky and technical, and you had to climb up that. And then you went into the descent, and the descent was a spot where I knew I could make up time. I started sweeping people up instantly, you know, like after we did that descent, people were just blowing up, and everyone was like, almost everyone was super kind and respectful too, which is great. When I'd be like, hey, if there's a chance that I could get around you, and people would work together. That was awesome. Once it came down to the last lap, I knew I shouldn't ask. And like, instead it was like a battle, and we needed to sort that stuff out as racers do. But I just started slowly inching my way back. And by the top of the first climb, I had reduced my power because at the beginning, again, like for the first 13 minutes, it was 300 watts. And then by the top of the first climb, it was down to 262 watts. And I knew that I needed to be somewhere around 240 to 50 for it to be like a capacitive effort. Because at 240 to 50, that would be 85% of my FTP for 4 hours. That's a really hard effort.
Super
so
hard.
I knew that that's kind of like where I needed to go. I settled in on the big long climb, and I just did 260 watts up that climb. Now, that wasn't me holding it specifically. I allowed myself to surge when I needed to, maybe drop down to like 240, but I tried to stay there. And then on the first descent, I made up some ground, got a great feed from friends, and then went into the second lap. And on that second lap, it was an absolute mental game. I was sweeping up people still, but on that final climb, I could see somebody. He was maybe like a football field ahead, and I told myself I was really eager to catch him because he looked like he was 30 years old, so I figured he might be in my age group. It's always hard to tell, and I was like, if I sprint up to catch him, I might regret that later. So on that climb, I just said, anytime there's a surge, try to get like visually closer. That's it. Just be a little bit visually closer. And I allowed myself to just go up to like 300 on a steep little punch, and then I'd settle back into around 250, and then 300, 250, 300, 250, and somewhere around there. And for that climb, I did 250 watts is what I averaged up the second climb. I passed the guy at the top. A guy grabbed onto my wheel, and I really tried to push as hard as I could. I dropped him off. And then on that final descent, I was just passing people that were finishing their first lap, and I did not know where I was in the course. I knew that I needed to win my age group in order to get a Leadville coin, and I knew that wasn't possible because my really fast friend Nick was way up. I hadn't seen him yet. He was way up the road. So I was just like, pick off as many people as you can. What might happen is that you get onto the podium on an off chance, and if you do, then maybe the podium winners don't want the Leadville coin, and it goes to you if they decide to roll it down, and that would be amazing. I made a pass. I made, I think, 6 passes on the last lap in my age group from people blowing up. I made 1 pass within the final 200 meters by not hitting my brakes and going, I got to see like what the speed was here. Going 41 miles an hour
that's
down
fast on a mountain bike.
Down a ski run that's like a fire road on a ski run covered in like pea gravel. And I was just not going to hit my brakes. And I didn't hit my brakes, and I came in on the inside, didn't have to get too close to him. But I passed a guy within like the final 200 meters. I had no clue if he was in my age group, and he was, and I ended up in 3rd for 4 hours and 4 minutes, and it was amazing. The power at the end of it was 245 watts for normalized. At the top of the last climb, it was just at 247 or 49. So that shows like it's a pretty even, consistent effort, and I didn't see much drop off. I showed up to the podium. My friend Nick had to go to work. He wasn't first on the podium. Second place didn't show up on the podium. I go up there, and then they usually don't have to roll down the coin to first, second, or third. They just give it to first, and then they throw in the rest of the lottery. But they asked me, they're like, do you want the coin? And I was like, yeah, I do. So I got the coin, and I got a Leadville qualification out of it. It's crazy. If I hadn't made that pass on the last lap in the last 200 meters, I wouldn't have been able to do that. Wouldn't have gone to Leadville, most likely. I really needed to pee. I didn't stop to pee. If I had stopped to pee, I wouldn't have made that pass. My pit crew was quick with the change, with a hydration pack and a bottle. If that wasn't quick, I wouldn't have passed him. Because honestly, if it was another 10 seconds, the trail was kind of like too narrow and weird for me to likely pass him. So like, it's one of those situations where you look back and you're always like telling yourself, oh, it's okay to like maybe ease up here or do something different. But in the end, like every little bit matters.
And
this is a good
counts.
reminder.
Yeah. I've had a couple of those in my career where, a couple seconds here or there was the difference of qualifying for something or winning something or not. And I've written those numbers down on my top tubes a couple of times over the years, like whatever it might be, like 12, meaning like you got that by 12 seconds. Like, don't forget that in this race or this moment. Because I've also done the opposite where you've thought, just for a second, I just need a break for 1 second, and you ease off. And that's all it took to get past. And
yeah,
man, that is just not a good feeling. It's like,
no,
you vow you'll never make that mistake again until it hurts so bad. And you really have to remember in that moment of difficulty how much future you will be thankful.
Yes.
And even not the moments of difficulty. Because like you said, in the aid station, it's so easy to take that extra second. Because it's like, well, no one's around. I'm doing well. I'm on my power numbers. I'm on my pace. Like, I'm going to take 10 more seconds to take a sip before I leave rather than pedaling and drinking. And then in the end, you lose that 10 seconds and you'll always wonder, was it that moment? So huge kudos to you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Wait, I have a question.
On that note.
Oh, okay.
On that note, really quick, I was like 30 seconds off of second, and I can look back and see so many spots where I could have gained that 30 seconds. So that is like also a good reminder to this. And to that point, everybody underestimates how important it is to keep, if you're doing 250 watts on a climb, ride at 220 watts on the flats, 230 watts. Like, everyone misunderstands how important that is and how much time you save because of the momentum you carry into the next thing.
Yes.
It's huge. It means that you don't have to surge. That was like a spot where I felt like I almost had like I was cheating, like it was an unfair advantage because nobody around me was doing it. Instead, they would get to the bottom of something, they'd go really hard, then they'd blow up, and then they'd have to recollect. And I was just much more even, and it pays off. It's super, super important. So, but to your point,
okay.
What were you going to ask?
So speaking of efforts paying off, because we were
Mhm.
talking all about pacing, and you mentioned the downhills, and you're someone who is very, very good at downhills. Like, I think you would call
Yeah.
that a strength, right?
Yes, for
Okay.
sure. Yep.
So
Yeah.
how do you weigh being a person who sprints around someone and the seconds it could save not getting stuck behind them and having to pass later versus, okay, I'm going to extend into VO2 and potentially burn some matches and be more tired later in the race, and or be more tired in that descent and be sloppier or go slower on the descent because you're a little cross-eyed? How do you make that
Yeah.
decision and weigh that?
Um, I really, really, really heavily rely on technique. I know that like if I can just focus on the technique, descending will take care of the rest. Like I never look at descending like, oh, there's an object that I need to work on, or like there's like a scary point, or there's even like a line I need to hit. Instead, it's always just like, just hit your technique. Because if you hit your technique, everything else takes care of itself.
Mhm.
Like, so I never look at like the descending side of things from like, oh, I'm so tired, I don't know if I'm going to be able to hold it together. I always think of it just like, just hold your technique. That's all you got to do. And I know it's easier said than done, but that's the mindset that I have. It's just like, just the technique, and it's over and over and over. And that always helps me be more consistent and fast on them. But I would always rather pass people on a descent than I would pass them on a climb, because on a climb I'm having to pay extra to make it happen,
Mhm.
like, so it's always on a race that's 4 hours long or longer than that, like your matchbook it disappears faster than you think.
Mhm.
And I just think that, you really have to save it for when it really matters. So like in this case, I had matches to burn and I was able to go over my threshold and surges on the final lap. And that was because I didn't do that earlier.
Mhm.
So I don't know if that answers it directly, but I'd rather always pass a person on a descent because then I get it to do it, quote, for free. And then number two, I'd almost always rather pace conservatively. So then if I do have to make that pass, at least I've got the capacity for it,
Mhm. And you
So,
said something really interesting in the recap when you said that you didn't expect people to let you pass on the second lap. I think that's
yeah.
an important thing to highlight. And I want to ask you, being in the amateur race, but also a fast amateur, what is your expectation for passing? Because this is a question I get a lot, and it's very different
Mm,
in the pro race. Like, I never expect another pro to let me pass. That's on me. And the same thing,
yep.
like, if you want to pass me, you have to find a way. But I think there is a difference in the amateur race, especially when maybe you're not even in the same category. I hear people say, like, we're not even in the same race. Let me go, let me go. And there is an like, that makes sense. But also, what if them slowing down and letting you pass means that their other competitor catches you? Tell the
Mhm.
people how you view this, because this is
Yeah.
an ongoing question, I think,
Yeah.
in
I,
cycling.
if you're in the same category, you're never obligated to let anybody by. If you're in a different category, I do think that you should let somebody by. Um,
I
and
agree.
and I think that usually if somebody catches you, so if somebody catches me, I almost always let them by, even if it's toward the end, because my thought is, what can I learn from them that's going to make me faster? And I think more people need to have that perspective. If somebody catches you in a race, seek to let them by so then you can start to learn from them sooner, because every linear foot of that course matters, and you could be wasting time, speed, and energy because you're not following somebody better. I think that it's a big problem that us amateurs face. And now, with all that said, I do think that an athlete, when you ask to go by, if you ask with exasperation, nobody is going to want to let you by. If you ask with a very calm tone, people are much more likely to let you by.
Mhm.
So when I catch somebody, I just go, hey, whenever you get a chance. And it feels like, oh, this isn't adversarial. This is friendly. And it makes it so they're much more likely to go around you. But we're all in this fight or flight mode, usually fight on the bike when we're racing. And if you come at somebody with any sort of thing that could be perceived as a threat, they will react appropriately to that.
Mhm.
So instead, you have to come at it with a very neutral tone. It brings down those guards, and it helps it make it sense so you can just go around them. But when it comes down to like the final lap, you're also like if you're in a different category, again, always let people by unless you're in a battle of your own sort of a thing where like, that can be respected and somebody should wait. But when it comes down to the final lap, for example, I was on somebody's wheel through that steep technical section and I knew I was faster than them, but I was not going to be so bold as to ask him to let me by. Like we were battling. He looked like he was 30. I probably looked like I was in my 30s too, maybe. And as a result, we kind of got the memo. We knew that we were racing each other. So I was not going to ask him. I knew that if I was going to make a pass, I needed to make the pass. It needed to be something that I did on my own. So, but the other note on passing, you never pull over as much as you think. Like however much you pull off and pull over, it's not enough. Like pull over more. Because the last thing you want to do is have a crash that's going to make it so that you have to take more time. Just pull over a little bit more. Ease up on the pedals for a half second. It's going to be faster when you can get behind that person because you're going to get a draft or they're going to show you better lines or you're going to have more motivation, whatever it might be. It's going to be worth that little extra time that you took to pull over just a bit more. It's a trigger point for me, especially because I end up being the athlete that in many cases I'm pacing more conservatively. Because of race experience. So then I get passed by a lot of people and then I have to make up a lot of those passes. And I'm also like an above average descender. So I make a lot of passes there. So like I'm always passing in races and that's definitely a trigger point for me.
My trigger point would be when someone comes up behind you and asks to pass, always respond. Even if the response is in a minute.
Yes.
Because sometimes I might come up and ask to pass, and if you don't respond, I don't know if you heard me. And so I'm not trying to be rude by asking twice, especially like it could be in a race, it could be just out on the trails. I'm wondering if you have headphones in. I'm wondering if, sometimes you just get distracted and you're in your own world. And then I'm asking twice and it might become adversarial. And that's not what anyone wants. So if you just say in a second, then I can take a moment to breathe, to get ready to make the pass. Or if you just say, okay, go ahead, that tells me that, okay, it's up to me to make the pass. That's totally fine, but I'm not going to scare you because that's the other thing I don't want to do is I don't want to come around you so fast that it startles you because you didn't hear me announce myself. And so just a quick okay or in a second or even a not yet, like a response is always helpful in those moments.
It's a good point. Can I share some of my Jedi mind tricks that I do with this?
Let's hear it.
If I'm on a descent and I've caught somebody, I'll say, "Hey, I think I can help. I think it can help out with some better lines. It'll make us both go faster." And so that has like a pretty high success rate. It works pretty well. And honestly, it's the truth. Like, it just hold on and we'll go faster. If I've caught you on the descent, like you can just drop into the draft and it'll work. Like you can follow the lines and it'll work better. The other one that I do is when we're coming up on somebody and I say, whenever you get a chance. And then if they don't respond or they respond unfavorably and say like, no, which is all too common. When they say that sort of a thing, I'll be like, okay, then in that case, I'm going to force a pass. It might endanger us. And then if they don't say anything, then I say, I'm forcing. Yeah. And then I say, I'm forcing a pass. And then I do force a pass. And because the fact is, if you say no and you're fast and another person behind you is faster, that person that's faster has every right to try to make a pass. And if you're not going to allow that to be safe, then that's your choice. It's just like a block pass in the sport of motocross. The whole concept is you come into a turn and you close out their options. You have an option to let off or we have a collision. And it's your choice. But I'm going to force the option because I'm faster and I'm behind you. And I've given you fair warning. You haven't allowed me. So I'm going to make it happen. And the other thing too is if somebody is incessant and then goes to block and that sort of thing, if they do that, then I will buzz your tire and I'll push your tire and I'll do those sort of things when we come into turns. That's racing. You're out there racing. And the fact is you don't get ahead in racing by holding somebody back. You get ahead in racing by allowing yourself to learn and to grow. And the way to do that is to learn from faster riders. They might be faster in this moment and you might be faster at another point. So swap, use that and work together. And you can actually, don't just think that if you're ahead of me on a single portion of this course, I've lost. That's not what it's like. It's let that person ahead of you. You can learn from them and it can really help.
Well, and that goes back to the idea that there's no perfect way for the race to play out. Like you're saying, you haven't lost just because someone passes you. That's not the finish line. Use that as a
Yeah.
message to yourself of, even if it's your competitor, oh, okay, they're riding the descents faster than me today. What does that mean? That means either I need to speed up on the descents or I'm going to have to beat them on the climbs. Like, use it as information to help guide the way that you race rather
Mhm.
than letting it deter you or worse, mess you. Like, if you're not letting someone pass, not only is it frustrating, like the person behind you, it's also frustrating you. And that is for
Mhm.
sure slowing you down. And so
Yep.
it's better that you just release that situation and then keep going as hard as you can.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. It was a totally different race effort than what Leadville will be.
Mhm.
This was much more punchy, that sort of thing, and Leadville is just going to be the most boring power graph you guys could possibly see. That's the goal, at least, because then that would mean that it's a capacitive day, right? So, whereas it might look a little different for you, Hannah, because you have to respond to moves and do that sort of thing. But for me, I just know I need to pace to kind of hit my marks. How are you feeling for Leadville prep? Excited?
I'm feeling good. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited that this is going to be the first time the women are racing Leadville with a no drafting on the men rule, which
Yes.
I think actually of all the races in the Grand Prix, it could have one of the biggest impacts on Leadville, which
Completely agree.
I don't think when it was announced, most people thought of that race. They immediately went to Unbound or gravel events. But if you look at the history of Leadville, it's largely been a game of getting on the men's wheels, which when that's allowed, that's part of the strategy. We all have to play
Yeah.
it. But now it's not allowed.
Yep.
And so I think we could see it play out differently than it ever has, which is, I think, super exciting for all of us women.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting because last year Sophia felt so bad for drafting off of guys because she had Melissa up there. Melissa's a good friend, that sort of a thing. And Sophia was like, she came across the line and felt terrible. And I even spoke with her shortly after the finish, and she just felt so guilty. And
Mhm.
she was like, I know there's no rule against it, but I felt terrible doing that because I was chasing down my friends. And then I think that she spoke to Michaela and Melissa. They're like, no, we were doing the same thing.
Yeah.
We all were,
Well,
Sophia. It's part of it,
and it
you know?
goes in all
Yeah.
directions, right? Like when you're using it, you feel bad, or when a woman catches you from behind in a train of men, that's also frustrating. You don't blame that person, but you're like, you probably would not have caught me
Yeah.
otherwise.
Totally.
You
Yeah.
know, or even the flip side of potential discouragement of knowing, man, those women are off the front in a group of 10 men and I'm alone. Like,
Yeah.
logistically, probably not going to catch them.
Yes.
And so I think if nothing else, it leaves the race open for a lot more potential scenarios. Whether they play out or not, we'll see. But
Yeah.
like we're saying, there's no, oh, they're off the front with the men, they're gone. That's the winner. It's going to be a true test of, can anyone catch them on their own power?
Yeah. It's going to change the race, I think. And here's what should happen, like just from a game theory perspective, is that the women will be in more packs together. They will race more dynamically in that sense. Whereas Leadville has historically been, like you said, the women are quite spread out through the field because of men's racers, whether it's professional men or really fast age group men.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be interesting because Leadville hasn't really had that that competitive element between the women,
Mm-hmm.
and in terms of like just racing directly against each other. I'm very excited for that.
Yeah.
I'm going to be out on course, so I don't know. I mean, I'll catch up on it afterward, but it's going to be exciting. So,
But we
yeah,
will see
I look
you,
forward.
which is one of the fun
Yes.
parts of Leadville. I know it's funny on paper. I think the out and back is like, wow, that's so unexciting. But honestly, it makes this a really special event since it's not what we do all the time. I've actually really grown to love that out and back because it is a super special thing to get to.
Yes,
Not only
it
hear
is.
the cheers, but just see everybody. It's even like as one of the pros, it's really inspiring to see people when I'm coming down Columbine, to see people turning themselves inside out to reach their own personal goals. I'm inspired by that. even people I don't even know. And so I think that to me is one of the things that makes Leadville so special.
And you're lifting everybody else as you go the other way. All of us look at you and we're just like, she's flying. I can do this.
Yeah.
You know? And like, it is a cool experience. Leadville is probably like no one would ever go and ride Leadville, the course, if they were just riding their mountain bikes in Leadville, Colorado. You never would, right? But the race course itself and the race itself, there is something super special about it. You know, it's a beast to take on, and anybody that does it gets full respect for being able to complete that beast of a race.
Absolutely.
So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going to be carrying on the sauna adaptation sort of stuff, not because of the heat, but because of the plasma volume. I'm going to be really focusing more on like sweet spot efforts, and in between now and there, that's at least what my training has me doing.
Do you know what corral you'll be in?
No, and that's a tricky thing because the course is so different and they changed everything from Tahoe Trail 100, so they don't really know yet. I would think that just based on my time, so Lachlan did it in 3:30, roughly 3 hours, 30 minutes. I was 4 hours, 4 minutes. So I think that I would probably be somewhere around red, I would think, which is where I was before. But one thing I learned last time I did Leadville is honestly the corral position didn't really matter that much. Like everybody passed me going up St. Kevin's. Everyone. Like I was a long way back there. So
I'm curious. I've heard from people in the final corral. I'm not sure what color that is. Do you know?
Brown, maybe?
Yeah, the final one. I've heard that from that one, it's very, very difficult to go, say, sub 9, if that's your desire, which it's like, why are you in that corral if you want to do that? Well, because the lottery. Yeah. So it does happen to people. And I've heard that's the case. It's very difficult because everyone is walking. And it's hard. Like some of those trails, if someone gets it your way, it's like there's not a lot of room for error because it is so steep. So is that something you've experienced?
Yeah, I had people walking for sure. I was able to get around it.
Okay. So it is possible.
For example, it is possible. But for example, I had people while I was going up St. Kevin's being like, "Who's this guy? I thought you were fast." I thought there was all those comments constantly going up the whole thing.
Was it mean?
No, most of it was in jest, I'm sure. You know what I mean? But I do think that people had like some disbelief. Like, what? Like, why is he going backwards? And it was, no, I'm not going backwards. I'm just holding my power. And all of you guys are just not being wise. You know, you're doing way too much. You're excited. You push too hard on the first climb. So like if whatever I was like red corral position, I was so far back at the top of St. Kevin's, but I was able to hold my power and stay on the bike. I'm sure if I was further back, then it would have been even worse. But, you know, from that point forward, though, like way I kind of viewed it too is like, well, that's a lot of like small micro drafting opportunities I'm going to have because I'm going to be passing these people and I'll just make sure that I ride behind them until I go around them, you know? So I don't know. It'll still be like we'll just be boiling a frog out there, people. We will not be, you know, said there will be no attack moments, no pog moments, nothing like that. It's just going to be nice and steady as she goes.
And what we didn't talk about your nutrition at Tahoe Trail, but what was that, and will you change it at all for Leadville or just extend it out a couple more hours?
Yeah, I am going to change it. I switched over the last 2 weeks to doing caffeine in my gels. And I just always have noticed that when I ingest caffeine through my gut, I don't take caffeine habitually. Maybe that's because of this, but it just messes up digestion later on. Like it always ends up causing a bit of gut distress. So I'm compartmentalizing my caffeine, and even I think I'm just going with mix and like just drinking my calories all day. I'll have gels as backups with my support crew, but I just am going to drink my carbs the whole way through. That's what's worked the best for me. And because I know Leadville's so long that like if you're going to get gut distress, it's going to happen in the middle of the race instead of after the race. So I'm going to go with what I know has worked best, what worked fantastic at Cape Epic and what has worked fantastic since then. And this strategy of separating the gels out and then having caffeine through there hasn't worked as well as I wanted. So yeah, I'm just going to do rum gum for my caffeine. I don't So I think that I'll probably plan on taking in somewhere around like 750 milliliters per hour until I get to power line. And then and I haven't worked all this out fully yet, but then once I get to power line, then I'll up it to a liter an hour. And then later on in the day, it'll probably be like once I get down from Columbine, I'll probably be at like 1.3 liters an hour of fluid. And then I'll have it all mixed out so that I'm taking in right around 120-ish, 110, 120 grams an hour is like what my body is adapted to right now. And then for sodium, I'll be taking in somewhere around 800 milligrams an hour. That's the high side of sodium according to the sweat test that I've recently done. And it's going to be pretty darn straightforward. I have to figure out a skin suit. I do know the tires I'm going to run. I'm going to run 2.2 Aspen STs, the 170 TPI, the really supple ones. And I already have things coming to be able to run blips on my bars and have my hands into the center. Yeah, I don't know. There's lots of stuff to figure out. But a skin suit, I think, is probably going to be faster, but nobody makes a good skin suit that I really like. So I've got to figure that out. It used to be everywhere. Now, like, nobody makes good skin suits. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. We'll see. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the plan.
Nice.
Hannah, we won't have you on before Leadville. I don't want you to reveal any secrets, so you don't have to. But I do want to say, if anybody's going to go to Leadville, please go and cheer her on when you're in the aid stations, when you pass her on course, or she passes you, I should say. Cheer her on and give her the support. Let her know you're a podcast listener. It's going to be an exciting day.
Thanks. I'm pretty excited. Leadville's my favorite race. So yeah, I'm just excited to be back there. Like I said, see everyone. I always take a moment because all of us pros are all the way up at the front. I always pause and look back at the sea of people. And to me, it is so emotional because everyone is there with a goal in mind. And to be surrounded by that many people pursuing something that is important to them is really empowering. And it's pretty rare to be surrounded by that many people who have set aside a single day that they have worked towards. And now it's all coming together. And this is the moment. And we're all experiencing that moment together. There's not that many places in life that happens. But it's really empowering if you take all of that energy from everyone and use it to fuel you forward. So my encouragement to everyone is to look around you and know that all of those people, everyone around you has sacrificed to be there. And that's really cool that we all have a story of how we got to that start line.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, Hannah. Well said. I'm excited for it. I'm hoping to see everybody there. Please cheer Hannah on as well. We obviously, I guess by the time this publishes, we're like 2.5 weeks out from Leadville. So it'll be quite exciting. It'd be great to see you there. Everybody, if you're listening to this podcast and you want to get faster, I use TrainerRoad 100% of the way to qualify for Leadville. I'm not exceptional, though. A huge amount of people have used TrainerRoad to qualify for Leadville and to be there and to prepare for it. If you want to get faster, and CI cycling coaching built from the ground up to do that very thing. We don't use blanket, just, ChatGPT stuff. We build our own models with our own data to solve specific problems that coaching, like humans and algorithms, have a hard time solving right now. So if you want to get faster, go check it out, trainerroad.com. We'll talk to you all next week. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.